I thought that before continuing with the dogs in the components in depth, we could take a look at the examples, at least at the basic ones, to take a look at different contexts in which the essential knowledge we have gone through is applied. Let's start with the hello world application or example. We have a script set up where we import ref and we just have a message reference and we just print the message. That's super easy. Handling user input. Here we have a title again, we have a reverse message button, we have an append exclamation mark, and a link with prevent default. Okay, so this reverses the message and this appends a exclamation mark, and this is a link with prevent default. Navigation was prevented. All right, let's take a look at how this thing works. So we have our script with a message ref, with a reverse message function, which just reverses the value of the message, and with a notify function, which prints an alert. And in the template, we have our message, a button which triggers this function reverse message, and a button which triggers on click, appending an exclamation mark to the message directly and as an inline expression. And then we have a link with an href to the view docs and with a click.prevent, which triggers a notification. And this prevent in this case means prevents the default action on this element, which is the navigation to this URL. Attribute bindings. Hover your mouse over here for a few seconds to see my dynamically bound title, which is this hello world. This should be red, but click me to toggle it. All right. It should be green and should toggle between green and blue on click. Okay. We have a message ref, we have an isRed ref, which is true, we have a color ref, which is green, we have a function toggle red, which changes isRed from true to false. We have a toggle color function, which changes the value of the color between green and blue. And then we have our template with a title message. Okay, so the title is the hover title. Interesting. The title of a span, or maybe other elements, title, hey there. Well, that's not the best place to put this thing. What about here? All right, to be honest, I didn't know this, that the title was the message in the tooltip. Okay, anyway, this is a static text. This is this paragraph with an on-click handle that toggles the red button, that toggles the red value, and a dynamic class which applies a red class, which makes the color red if this isRed is true. Otherwise, it doesn't. And then we have these style bindings of the color. This would mean basically, yeah, that's the same as writing this, which would means the color has the value of color being the color this thing, so either green or blue. But you know, that's the shorthand for this. And of course the on-click toggle color. Then we have conditionals and loops. We have a show, which is true. We have a list, which is a list of numbers. And then we have here 4 buttons. The first one changes the value of show from true to false, and vice versa. And this show is here, B if this show is true, renders the list, if not, hides the list. So this thing shows or hides the list. And then there are these v else if and v else statements, which are shown if this is false, and depending on the list length. Then we have push number to the list, which pushes a new number 1, 2, 3. Yeah, basically if we click here, number 4 will be pushed to the list. List pop pops a number to the list, and pops means pop out the last number, the last item of the list. And then we have list reverse, which triggers the reverse method. These are just array methods. And then we have this message displayed because the list has length. If we begin to pop things from the list, eventually we will get this thing, list is empty. All right, then we have form bindings. That's a bit longer, interesting. We have a bunch of inputs. Let's take a look at this input. The first one is of type text. It doesn't specify the type, so I guess the default is type text. It two-way binds the value of text, which has initial value edit me, which means that the value shown in here will be the one of text, and when we change it, input event is emitted that changes the value of text. So, and here we have the text value printed, edit me. So if we change this thing changes. Two-way data binding with vModel. Then we have a checkbox with a vModel checked and a label for checkbox that indicates whether the checkbox is checked or not. And this checked is true or false, depending on the state of the checkbox. Then we have a multi-checkbox, which is bound to check names, and this check names is an array of strings. Initially it has Jack, and the initial value is Jack. If we had an initial value like John, both Jack and John would be checked. And since the vModel is check names, when we click on one of them, that triggers adding or removing from the check names array the value of the checkbox, which in this case is either Jack, John, or Mike. So if we have Jack and Mike, then the check names are this thing. And if it's empty, it's an empty array. Then we have radio buttons, which are bound to the picked reference, and the picked is a ref with an initial value of 1. And these are bound to these two inputs, and the values are 1 and 2, so it's kind of gonna do the same. Picked is not an array anymore, it's a string whose value, because we can only have one radio button selected at a time, picked will have the value of either 1 or 2, and here we can see the current value. So if we select 2, of course, picked will have a value of 2, and so on. That's all because of the vModel. Then we have a select bound to the selected property, which has an initial value of A. So that's the first one selected. Oh, here, sorry. If we change this thing, the initial value selected will be B. There you go. We have the first one, which is disabled, which has no value. And then we have this, whose value is automatically the content. Then we click on them. sorry, by the virtue of this two-way data binding, the value of the property changes. And then we have multi-select, which is the same, but except that we can select multiple values. We bind it to this multi-selected, which is the initial value A, which is an array, because we can select multiple. And the rest kind of works more or less the same. We have this multiple attribute here, and here it's the same thing. And we have a simple component. We have a apps.view, which imports the to-do item component. We have a list of groceries, and then we are providing each to-do item with the to-do object it's representing, so that its content can be dynamic. We also need to provide each component with a key, which is explained in the guide section of V4. So we simply render the list of to-do items with this loops over grocery list, loops over each item of the grocery list, and then the to-do prop is the item, and then we provide also a key. Each item has an ID and text. And to-do item just prints the text of the to-do and takes props defined by this function define props. Inside we can put an object with the key as the name of the prop, as the label of the prop, and the object as the type accepted for this prop. This could be object, this could be array, boolean, string, number, and so on. This is the type definition for the prop, and then we can use it here. And this thing returns props that we could use if we wanted to inside the script setup. All right, so I won't go into all these possibly more complex examples. So next we are gonna start with the components in depth, but that's gonna go for the next video.